Last on Everdark. The party to celebrate the upcoming opening of the Everdark Academy began with Balthazar playing Shark as he chatted up every nation's officials, mentioning their secrets in passing. Now we turn to the first YouTube show that Julian and Christian have done since becoming vampires. We also met Lord Ryder, a Werren vampire who plays a large role in Everdark Academy, the next serial in this universe. Episode 146, Dream. Christian had the House Winter Vampires set up the interview area in the corner of the courtyard. The couch and chairs were surrounded by flowers and had a view of the stunning night sky. Christian wanted their viewers to see the beauty of the Everdark, to be drawn to it just like he and Julian were, and to be overwhelmed by the thought that there was something more out there. The Everdark was a dream. He wanted every human to have this dream, but he wondered if it was something he could make happen. Was this something he was capable of filming? Could he show humanity what they were missing? The elder Harrows would sit on the couch while Julian would be seated on one of the two chairs to the couch's left side to interview them. When they brought on another of the vampires, they would sit in the other chair. It was an intimate, almost cozy setup, which was to invite the viewer in, to make them feel as if they were part of a family discussion.
Aim that light a little lower,
Christian instructed one of the House Winter Vampires, who eagerly complied.
How is the crew working out?
Rajani asked brightly as she appeared by his side, almost as if by magic. She was dressed in one of her Jedi robes, but this one appeared to be more formal, likely in honor of the occasion. It was a dark blue with dark grey piping, and brought out the silver in her eyes.
You're making me feel a little superfluous,
Christian admitted as he looked through one of the 6 cameras' viewfinders.
6 cameras. I remember when we had one shaky cam and that was it.
There were over a dozen vampires assisting them now, from setting up cameras and lights to helping with wardrobe, makeup, and hair. Christian couldn't turn around without one of them smiling at him, asking how they could help.
On the contrary, this show is nothing without you and Julian. We're just here to facilitate,
Rajani said eagerly. They were doing more than that. Though it wasn't said, it was clear that Rajani saw their show as a prime PR vehicle to sell humanity on vampires. Christian agreed with her. He and Julian had a large, loyal audience. Ever since it had come out that vampires were real, and that Julian and Christian had not only discovered them but become one of them. Their old videos had been staggered by comments. Their email boxes were overflowing. Private messages were constant. In addition to those vampires helping on the production side, Rajani also had a group of House Winter Vampires working through all of the feedback to see what the public mood was and respond appropriately. Mostly, their audience was excited and curious, while only a relative few called them traitors, bloodsuckers, or demons. There were worse things as well, but Christian noted that Rajani had her people filter out the most objectionable ones, even though both he and Julian had told her that they wanted to know what people were thinking, especially the bad stuff. But evidently there was only so much the Spy Master was willing to expose Julian and himself to. It was touching in a way and frustrating in others.
I guess I'm just used to a more stripped-down production,
Christian finally said.
You have more resources now. We want you to focus on the content while we handle all of the small details,
Rajani told him. Christian sighed, though part of him chafed at this handling. He knew that it was important. Just before the gala, he and Julian had been watching news reports regarding riots in London, Rome, and New York. People were protesting the opening of the academy. There had been suicides and murders. Some poor goth kid had been staked because the killers had assumed they were vampires since they wore black and favored dark music. So anything that he and Julian could do to lower the temperature around the world was a good thing.
Christian, should we sit here?
Joanna asked. Hair and makeup surrounded them, dusting a little light powder on their handsome faces and smoothing back a stray, unruly hair or two. They needed little help, as both glowed with health and vitality. A sweep of their surface thoughts told Christian that they were far calmer than himself. The Harrows, though, were used to being on television, and their words being, well, controversial. Their desire to support Julian, though, kept their nerves steady, making people less afraid of vampires, more accepting of the immortals, would make Julian's life better, so that was what they would do.
That's perfect.
Christian told him as he adjusted the camera angle slightly. Christian's mother came up behind the couch and touched Joanna Harrow on the shoulder. A firm squeeze and smile. Though his and Julian's parents had spent every day together since the Harrows had been brought back to life, his parents still couldn't quite believe their best friends were back. His mother often just touched Joanna to assure herself that the other woman was truly there. Her athletic form was clothed not in the usual cargo pants and t-shirts that she usually wore, but a black sleeveless dress with a high Chinese collar. Jack was in a tuxedo, looking very much like an elegant, predatory James Bond. Christian's father looked tweedy and scholarly in comparison. He was behind the couch now too, speaking to Jack and Joanna.
Have your parents had any thoughts of, joining us?
Rajani asked carefully. Christian drew in a steadying breath.
Not yet.
In fact, his parents had studiously avoided talking or even thinking about it. He found himself listening to the patter of their subconscious now as they spoke to the Harrows. While Jack and Joanna were absolutely certain of their choice to become vampires, it seemed his own parents were on the opposite end of the spectrum.
It's one thing for Jack and Joanna to be turned. They're so athletic and, well, young.
His mother had confessed with an almost embarrassed shrug.
And you guys aren't young?
Christian had lifted an eyebrow. Now that he spoke to people routinely who were hundreds of years old, it was hard to treat half a century of life as old. She fussed with the front of her shirt.
They've been dead for over a decade, Christian, but the bodies that Caemorn created for them still look the same as the ones they had back then. Your father and I, we've aged, become old fuddy-duddies in comparison.
Mom, you realize that once you're turned that you'll be perfectly healthy. More than that, stronger, faster, without any aches or pains. You'll have nearly boundless energy and—
A dowdy vampire?
His mother interrupted him, with a moe of distaste on her face.
What?
He laughed.
That's what I'd be.
His mother flapped her arms at her sides.
I have just got comfortable with the idea of being middle-aged, and now, I don't know. I can see the Harrows as vampires, but me? I don't know.
He'd gone over to her then and grasped her forearms.
You know that there isn't a look for a vampire, right? You've seen Charlie. He loves taking on the visage of a friendly grandmother. William looks like a teenager. And there are plenty of middle-aged-looking vampires, too. They're all old enough to make you and Dad seem like teenagers.
I realize it's foolish and vain and stupid. And
His mother hung her head.
I'm afraid, Christian. I'm afraid I won't recognize me. I'm afraid I won't fit in as a vampire or with who I am now.
She shook her head and then slowly added.
Your father and I have never been religious, as you know, but—
Knowing there's something after this life makes you think you're meant to leave it?
His voice was soft, and though he had posed the statement as a question, he knew that was how she felt. She wasn't alone. Religious worship had shot up since vampires had been revealed. There were those humans even joining the Order. Kali vampires were endlessly interviewed about the afterlife. Caemorn, though, was very careful in what he allowed to be discussed. She nodded miserably.
But I don't want to leave you. I don't want to grow feeble while others stay the same. I want to be apart, but, I just don't know yet.
Christian understood his mother's conflict. In some ways, it would have been nice for his parents to have the clarity and certainty of the Harrows, but that wasn't who they were. He tried not to take it personally that they might not choose the vampire path. He knew they loved him, but this had to be their unequivocal choice. He didn't want them to regret it. Christian turned to Rajani.
You're worried if my parents don't choose to be turned, that people might make a negative inference.
Your parents must do what is right for them as individuals.
Rajani said, even as she mentally acknowledged what he stated to be true.
I hope they join us. The Harrows are, they were television celebrities before and now. Your parents are more—
Normal?
Christian lifted an eyebrow. She grinned and nodded.
Yes, maybe more approachable is the word. They seem more like people others might know or be.
I'll let you know what they decide.
Christian said. She nodded and disappeared into the crowd, once more almost like magic. He was sure she would pop back up again when needed. He turned back to the cameras, checking that they were angled just right, as Julian sat down in the chair preparing to interview his parents. But he was not alone for long, as a tall, slender figure holding a purple velvet bag lovingly in his arms joined him. Elgar and his skull, which he had agreed reluctantly to put in a bag for the evening, had arrived.
Elgar, I didn't know if we would see you here tonight.
Christian admitted.
I'm glad you are.
Crowds of humans were often too much for the elder vampire to bear, though his thirst had been long quenched. The memory of starvation still held him tightly, and he feared he might lose control. And Elgar wasn't a big fan of lots of people in any event. Elgar regarded his bare feet that stuck out from under the dark grey robes he wore. Shoes were something he just wasn't terribly fond of. Thankfully, they had gotten him to wear something other than sweatpants and a hoodie. "You and Julian need support," Elgar said, "and Master might wish someone whispered to."
Julian and I appreciate your presence.
Christian said fondly.
I hope there'll be no need of whispering, though. I'm surprised that Damon hasn't sent you to one of the big cities where there's unrest.
"Not yet. Emotion must be expended. Then whispering will help more later," Elgar explained, this time staring at a power cord with intense concentration.
I see.
Christian felt a finger of cold run down his spine. But it was not from Elgar's words. It was from the ghost. Few ghosts could come inside of Nightvallen. The city itself seemed to drain them so only the strongest could survive for long. But with all the life here, the spirits could not help themselves from drifting over the water, through the woods, and passing under the gates. "What is wrong?" Elgar asked, noting his sudden alertness.
Uninvited guest.
Christian said. "I do not see anything." Elgar frowned as his silver eyes swept the surrounding area before dropping back down to his feet.
Doesn't have enough power to be visible to most, but it will if I don't stop it.
Christian said. His gaze slid to it. It appeared to be an old man with a crooked, almost curved back. His cheeks were carved out as if the flesh had been scooped out with spoons. His thin lips were parted, and Christian could see a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. They spread in a smile, and the old thing giggled, as if testing him. Not as if, it is. The creature extended one bony hand towards the female Chancellor of Germany. A single swipe of her back could drain half her energy in moments. Christian's right hand slid into his pocket, where he kept a soul gem just for this purpose. His gaze locked with that of the creature, who flashed him another grin followed by a hiss. The face no longer looked human, and he doubted this creature ever had been. He fumbled with the gem, dropping it back into the depths of his pocket as he tried to pull it out. Lisette suddenly appeared behind the creature, her own soul gem ready. Christian felt a wave of annoyance that she had to step in.
"Let Christian do it, Lisette."
Caemorn's voice was in both of their minds. Lisette stiffened at the unexpected mental command, but then bowed her head and put her soul gem away. "Master is letting Kali use his mind to communicate," Elgar said with a touch of surprise.
Yes.
Christian said, and drew out his soul gem successfully.
They're working through another lot like that. He'll be having Balthazar raise the dead in no time.
The old creature had taken his momentary inattention to lope away towards some delegates from the Far East. Christian swiftly threaded his way through the crowd, keeping the creature in sight.
"My dear boy, you're Christian, correct?"
A plump man stepped in front of him. Christian grimaced.
I'm sorry. I need to...
"Where are you off to?"
The plump man's cheeks were flushed from alcohol.
"I was hoping to speak with your, master, but he seems..."
Silence!
Christian commanded the man, even as he saw the creature reach for a delegate's leg. The man's mouth hung open, silenced in mid-word. It had come easily to compel this man. He hoped that he had not just created an international incident, but better to silence one than have another drop dead.
Sorry about that, but I have to take care of something. You're released.
Christian cried as he slipped past the man, who blinked as if coming out of a deep sleep. The creature hissed at him when he mentally grasped hold of it. It felt like plunging himself mentally into cold, dark water that had a layer of slime over the top. Sweat coated Christian's brow. The creature fought him, trying to touch the nearest human.
Come to me.
Christian demanded and thrust out the soul gem. Another hiss, but the creature took a step towards him. It tried to pull back, but he clamped down mentally as hard as he could. Kicking and spitting, he dragged it to the soul gem. The gem glowed blue-white and grew icy cold in his hand. One of the delegates was blinking at him owlishly, having seen the flash of light but not the creature that was captured. Christian gave him a small smile and bow before turning on his heel to go back to the interview area. He wiped a shaking hand over his sweaty brow. He felt like he'd run a marathon.
Excellent work.
Camorn said, and it had Balthazar's approval too.
I shall show you how to turn the creature to work for you.
I don't know if I want this thing anywhere near me.
Christian admitted as he threaded his way through the crowd.
Many creatures that are unpleasant are useful.
Camorn told him.
With the students coming, it will be good to have another creature on guard.
I suppose you're right.
Christian said reluctantly. Just then, Tarn and Farun raced in front of him, smelling like wet dogs. The two werewolves made a beeline for Camorn.
Looks like Tarn and Faroon were playing in the water again.
Christian remarked. There were gasps and restrained cries as the world leaders jumped out of the werewolves' way. They kneeled down in front of Camorn, panting and making curious growling sounds. They were speaking to Camorn in their own way.
I had them watching the ocean. There has been activity there.
Camorn answered.
What kind of activity?
Christian asked. Christian saw Camorn pat both werewolves on the head. They lifted their snouts and howled in pleasure before Camorn sent them off again. They bounded off once more, having checked in with the Kali vampire. The world leaders stared, frozen for some moments before conversation began again.
Hungry things.
Camorn answered obliquely.
Since Damon's return, more creatures have woken.
And now, with Nightfall unoccupied?
Yes, they are drawn here. That is why we must recruit as many creatures as we can.
Camorn told him.
All we would need would be for one of the students to die and not be reborn into a second life.
A crowd was starting to form around the interview area. He felt Balthazar's mind touch his, as his master, the Vampire King, and Camorn all approached. For some reason, the image of boxer shorts with the Eiros logo appeared in his mind's eye. Then those shorts were filled out by Balthazar's arse cheeks, and his master was mentally wagging them about. When Balthazar finally sent him an image of his master just wearing the boxer shorts while perched on a desk, making a come-hither gesture, Christian let out a snort, which had Elgar actually looking at him. Christian blushed and shook his head to indicate it was nothing. He tried focusing on the cameras.
What are you doing, Balthazar?
Christian asked, as the three impressive immortals glided across the courtyard to him. Oh, enjoying the party, Balthazar answered with a grin.
You're teasing Camorn somehow, aren't you?
Christian grinned and shook his head. Well, someone has to, and that is the essence of fun for me, Balthazar admitted, completely unrepented.
I'm sure Camorn is thrilled.
Oh, he is. He most certainly is. The crowd parted on either side of them, leaving 6 feet of distance on all sides of the three immortals. More than a few world leaders opened their mouths and reached tentatively towards the triumvirate, but stopped at the last moment, their eyes going empty and their mouths slack before they turned away. Damon was not feeling social, despite the party atmosphere. Master, Kali, my king, Elgar said to the velvet bag and bowed. Elgar, I'm so proud of you. You followed the bag suggestion, Balthazar said as he slung an arm around Christian's shoulders and kissed his temple. Yes, master. You were right that the skull causes too much consternation, even though it is a comforting object, Elgar agreed.
People are very strange about bones, Elgar, but I completely understand your point of view.
Camorn murmured. Are you still upset that Damon suggested you not have your bone bear here? Balthazar laughed.
The bear is quite sweet,
Christian said loyally. It stinks to high heaven, Balthazar said with a shake of his head. Among other things, I thought the werewolves were enough excitement for the evening, Damon remarked.
Are we going to have the bone bear on camera?
Julian asked. Makeup and hair people had finally been shooed away. Julian and his parents looked like the incredibly handsome family they were. Damon swept over to his fledgling and embraced him. "No bone bears today," Damon said.
That's probably best,
Jace said.
Yesterday, Tarn grabbed the poor bear's leg and ran off with it.
They were hungry. I kept them from hunting too long.
Caemorn said with a faint grimace. Christian couldn't help but laugh, though, as he remembered the werewolves and the bear charging one another, knocking things and people over as they play-fought with one another throughout the Eiros Palace. As strange as their new lives were, Christian realized he wouldn't change anything. He remembered how narrow his view had been before they'd found the vampires, how he hadn't believed in anything he couldn't see or touch. And now, here he was, freed of David's ghost, in love with an immortal, a student of the dead and the mind, a friend to beings that were ancient and wise and perhaps in some ways unknowable. But he was going to give knowing them and understanding them and everything else his best shot.
Are you ready to do this thing, Christian?
Julian asked, slipping from Damon's arms back into his seat. Christian looked from his best friend to the Harrows, to his parents, and then to Balthazar. He wanted everyone to experience the Everdark. He wanted them to feel the possibilities of it. He wanted them to dream of it, like he did.
I'm more than ready,
Christian said as he went to the computer setup which controlled all of the cameras.
Let's do this thing.
Join us next time for episode 147. What's next?
On my serial site, wraithrain.com, members can leave a comment after every chapter that I post. Here are a few comments that came from chapter 147, the last chapter of Everdark. Finishing this story now, and knowing that there's still more with Everdark Academy and Equinox, makes this so worth it. This is honestly one of the most amazing stories I've read, and I'm so happy there's still more to come. I'm so sad I've finished it now, but also so happy it will continue in Everdark Academy. I started out with Dragon's Reign on Spotify, but later with Everdark 2 bought all the ebooks and waited for them since book 3 came out. I couldn't wait any longer and bought a membership, and I'm so happy I did. I will now read through every single book on the site. Keep up the lovely work. Another satisfying happy ending. I love all the characters so much and the whole universe you built here. I'm glad it doesn't have to end, and I can't wait to start reading Academy. I love Caemorn and Elgar, so I hope they'll play into it. Love your work as always. This is all to assure you guys that there is a lot more to come, and I'm really excited to share it with you. Next week is the last audio episode of Everdark. If you're listening to this in real time, we're going to do a premiere on YouTube and then a live stream after to celebrate. I hope you can join us. Look on the live tab of our YouTube channel and you'll see when it's scheduled in your local time. We'll also be on Facebook and Twitch, but YouTube is the easiest way to participate in the chat since that's where 90% of the audience is.